Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and with Next Fest behind us, or almost behind us at the time of this video's release, it's time to take a look at some of the games you might have missed over the course of the short week packed with hundreds of demos. If you see something you like in this video, make sure you go wishlisted on Steam, as it's a great way to support independent developers especially, and hey, it doesn't hurt to like the video to help spread the word through YouTube either. I have another video from the start of Next Fest that you should check out too, linked in the pinned comment below, but with my usual focus on strategic and tactical games, with timestamps down below, and with no more time to waste on a prolonged introduction, let's dive right on in. The Tribe Must Survive is releasing in just a couple of weeks, and the demo was quite enthralling. This is looking like a very promising title with some very fresh ideas. I'm a sucker for Lovecraftian horror, and it's not often you see horror survival city builders despite the fertile ground for exploration there. In The Tribe Must Survive, you're leading a Stone Age tribe that is under constant threat from something that's lurking in the shadows. This has some direct mechanical impacts, as you'd expect. Light and shadow play pivotal roles, and so the day-night cycle and access to fuel for your central fire are all key elements. As you establish buildings to gather resources, for example, your people will have to travel further and further out to gather the resources, bring them back to the associated buildings, and then to the storage for said resource too. Hunting will take your tribesfolk quite far out at times, whereas trees and stone deposits near your camp give you easy but finite access to fundamental resources, eventually forcing you to venture further and further out to get what you need. You can add more fuel to the fire to increase its radius, but only so far, and that same fuel is typically what you need for construction. There's a fine balance then of saving it to build essentials or burning it to acquire more resources. During the day, venturing farther away isn't an issue, but you'll want to order everybody back so they're by the fire before the sun sets, and that means shortened work days the longer the commute is. Anybody caught out in the dark might disappear, and that'll cause fear to fester among your survivors. Fear and discontent are key factors to keep an eye on here. Instability takes on many forms, and every one of your tribesfolk has different personalities and tolerances, but should they become too unhappy or too scared, you'll be dealing with negative consequences that could bring chaos and disarray. Strangers will come through from time to time making requests or perhaps threats, and you'll go out to explore neighboring regions yourself, having to manage supplies and moods during the trip. There are suitably Neolithic-era considerations like shamans and magic and herbal medicine and spiritual needs. There's a plethora of buildings to consider, and just a variety of ideas that I can't say I've seen before, or at least not very often. The Tribe Must Survive is a game you must keep an eye on. Lysfanga, the Time Shift Warrior, is an extremely interesting game that might not seem like the classic definition of strategic or tactical, but it doesn't take long to realize just how snugly it fits into those genres. An isometric action game, Lysfanga puts you in charge of a character who, as the title suggests, has some degree of control over time, allowing her to basically exist in parallel timelines at the same time, or at least have multiple parallel versions of herself in the same timeline, acting at the same time. The way this works in-game is you play through one cycle until time runs out, you choose to move to the next one, or you die. Then, as you're playing the next cycle, the first one plays your moves out exactly as you did them. Then the third and fourth and so on and so forth until you run out of cycles, or you clear a battle zone. This makes each battle a kind of tactical puzzle, so apart from traveling from battle to battle in this isometric view, exploring a fantastical world and looking for various collectibles to help unlock new abilities and spells and additional cycles, anytime you enter a combat area, you're able to take a quick look around the map to get an understanding of what enemies you're up against, how they're laid out, and how you need to navigate the battlefield to get to them. You only have a limited number of cycles, with more available through progression, and if you want to win the battle and move forward, you need to eliminate all the enemies in the area. These enemies come in a variety of shapes and sizes with different abilities. Some can be taken out individually, some can cause a chain reaction that eliminates others, while some require teamwork between time cycles. There's a pair of enemies that need to be eliminated at around the same time, otherwise they'll revive each other. There's an enemy that has a giant shield, so you'll want to attack it from one side in one cycle, freeing a future cycle up to attack it from the opposite angle at the same time, as said enemy is distracted by the U from the prior cycle. This is some really fun stuff, and you can always go back to old battles to find efficiencies and beat old best times. The demo battles were fairly simple, but I can see this being extremely addictive as the fights get more and more complex, and as far as fresh ideas are concerned, this is definitely one to check out. Crown Wars: The Black Prince is set during the 100 Years' War, and its structure, in some ways, makes me think of King Arthur Knight's Tale, a game I thoroughly enjoyed. You've got a central castle from which you lead your heroes against a great, growing evil, and when you send them from mission to mission, they participate in turn-based tactical combat, as well as turn-based stealth-based exploration. These missions spread across parts of Western Europe, and the time it takes to get to and from them will surely play a part in the greater management options in the game that unveil themselves over time. Combat was visceral, and the interesting cast of characters definitely stands out. Every soldier has a different class, giving them access to different weapon sets and abilities, and managing these properly will determine what they can do and how. Are they ranged attackers? Are they capable of armor piercing? Do they throw flammable flasks? Do they inflict poison damage effects? Or do they perhaps come with familiars like dogs or bears? There's fun to be had here, and you're arming your people's main and offhand with different tools of the trade to work well on their own as well as with their partners on a mission. The demo showed a decent amount of variety at least, and I'm curious to see what more there is to unlock down the line. Most of the customization happens at the barracks, while other buildings like the forge and laboratory suggest places to manufacture weapons and alchemical tools too, like the aforementioned flasks and grenades. There's some interesting new ideas littered around Crown Wars: The Black Prince, with the different fighting styles you can choose for your characters being the most intriguing. From what I've seen so far, each character has 2 fighting styles to choose from, applying different buffs or changing how enemies behave around them through taunting, for example. It's not so simple as just swapping between weapon sets, and it has some potential in adding a new layer of decision-making into the mix. Crown Wars: The Black Prince definitely checks a lot of boxes for fans of medieval turn-based tactics games, and you should certainly keep an eye on it if that's your kind of thing. Mystical Conquests is a scenario-based 4X title with procedurally generated maps, a turn-based strategic layer, and turn-based tactical battles too. While it looks simple at first glance, there's a lot going on here that keeps pulling me back in. The demo scenario has you hunting a dragon as it sends waves of enemies towards your city, and your band of warriors needs to venture forth, but also be ready to defend said city. Exploration leads your armies to various villages littered around the world, offering resources or new recruits, and you'll come across chests full of rewards too. As you explore, however, you'll come across the various forces of evil as well, with a great variety of enemy types to deal with in turn-based tactical battles. Battlefields are relatively small and hex-based, with obstructions and elevation to consider, as each unit has 2 action points with which to move, attack, or use items they've gathered or that you've crafted back at your city's armories and laboratories. Back at your city, use a variety of resources to build tile improvements like you would in any other 4X game, with farms to make more food, for example, but you'll also build other city buildings on these tiles too, buildings that would normally stack within the city itself in any other 4X. So you'll quickly run out of space and then need to upgrade the city itself at great cost of resources to expand its reach and options. Balancing growth and picking and choosing the order of operations isn't the only strategic level thinking here. You'll need to research tech using a very interesting card-based tech tree that introduces randomization and burning other cards to complete upgrades. And you'll need to manage workers who could either be left at the city to work the various structures, or added to armies to provide some additional damage output in times of need. Mystical Conquests was a lot of fun, and I can see it being the type of game that's played in multiple short bursts of time, adding up to a surprising hour count. Oddsparks is a fun automation game that feels inspired in some ways by Pikmin. It has an adorable aesthetic, is driven by a mysterious narrative that speaks of ill portents and the end times, and on top of it all, it's a factory game where production chain and supply chain management blend with third-person isometric exploration and adventuring, complete with quests, side quests, combat, and more. Without wanting to spoil any narrative elements, to put it briefly, you've been empowered with the ability to read and engage with ancient texts and technologies, allowing you to manufacture and command sparks. These little guys that can do a variety of things, including harvest resources, carry them from place to place, and then process them into other resources, including more sparks. The fun in games like this, from the perspective of somebody interested in resource management and automation, is the variety of raw materials and products and tools at the player's disposal. And looking at the Steam page and trailer, it's clear that the developers are going to be quite inventive here, using the fantastical nature of the game to free themselves of constraints and really explore some zany ideas. And what's more, it doesn't look like this side of the game is being skimped out on. For one, it's right in the title, but if you look at the screenshots and again the trailer, you'll see that some of these production chains get quite complex and expansive. What's more, this is a game that can be played in both single and multiplayer with up to 4 players. If you're looking for an automation game with a twist, Oddsparks is definitely worth keeping an eye on. Backpack Battles is an interesting one. Pick a class, buy inventory items, and then watch the fights play out as your adventurer goes toe-to-toe against other adventurers in either ranked or unranked multiplayer. The game is only available to play in multiplayer, and every run consists of a limited number of battles and lives, with each loss chipping away at your count of lives. Pretty simple stuff as far as the fighting is concerned, but the majority of the work on your end as a player has to do with the setup. This is a game about inventory management, taking the frustrating Tetris aspect of fitting things in your backpack in an RPG and making it the core of the game. At the start of each run and between each battle within a run, you'll be able to spend your gold to purchase a variety of randomly selected things from the shop. This includes expansions to your backpack, food, weapons, potions, and much more besides, with each one having some time-triggered impact or another, often buffed or amplified or otherwise supporting adjacent inventory items, provided they're of a certain class or type. So it all boils down to placing things in the right place to buff your attack rates, your health regen rates, or to perform or defend against various types of damage. There are a couple of different classes of characters to play as in the demo, with more available in the full game, and I had more fun than I'd expect trying to puzzle out exactly how to expand my backpack and where to place what item, praying to RNGesus for the shop to provide me with good items for the upcoming run, or at least upcoming battle. Nothing too complex on the surface here, but easily addictive with a very low barrier to entry. If you're looking for something a little different, Backpack Battles is a fun one to check out. Faraway Lands Rise of Yokai puts you in charge of a village in Japan, charged with defeating the rising threat of evil powers. The demo is limited to just 3 days of play and only a single choice of leader, with much content locked away. Even with that, it's clear to see that this is a game with a ton of potential that's well worth keeping an eye on. You'll be building up a variety of structures to gather and process resources, to train up your soldiers, and to travel to various parts of the world in the interest of gathering allies, creating additional resources, and establishing a stand against the yokai. You'll manage villagers with different traits that make them more or less capable of taking on various tasks. You'll presumably be teching up from bows and arrows to gunpowder, and you'll be harnessing the power of the gods, both for combat and village management, as shrines and prayers can enable active and passive buffs to keep things going. There are a lot of moving parts in this one, including a mine full of resources and monsters alike, the aforementioned exploration and trade mechanics, the management of mood, resources, villagers, taxes, and the combat that is equal parts simple and intense. You face off against more and more dangerous yokai attacking your village, and you'll want to consider things like target prioritization and the positioning of your troops to make sure you survive every night. On the topic of which, day-night cycles are very much a thing, asking you to consider working shifts and overtime, and beyond that, you'll be going from season to season, dealing with changing weather conditions too. Rain, for example, might make fire arrows and gunpowder weak, and the winter months might cause people's mood to shift because of the cold. New immigrants will bolster your numbers, but balancing unemployment and picking the right immigrants based on their combinations of traits means you won't simply chase exponential growth. If you're unable to meet people's needs in your limited space, or if you're otherwise able to keep their mood up through the provision of jobs, decorations, and shrines, they might just choose to leave when you need them most. I wish I could spend more time in Faraway Lands Rise of Yokai because I want to explore more of its options, more of its enemy types, more of its soldier types, more of its buildings, and more of its mechanics. That means the demo let me play just enough to whet my appetite and keep me curious for more. I'll definitely be keeping an eye on this one. And there you have it, folks, some more demos that stood out during this Next Fest. If you played anything in particular that you think fans of these genres might like, myself included, drop a note in the comments below. And if this video helps you find something you like, make sure you go wishlist the game to support the developers, and consider liking this video too. Check out the video linked on screen right now for even more great games from this Next Fest, and don't hesitate to subscribe for more strategic and tactical gaming. As always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big ol' thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.